A few weeks ago, I started to share, I did 2 BBCs on a wonderful book by Lama Yeshe called Introduction to Tantra, The Transformation of Desire. And I'm not going to talk about Tantra because I'm a baby Tantric practitioner and I don't really have the skill to talk about that. But the beauty of this book is that about a third of it, Lama Yeshe talks about the prerequisite. If you do want to practice Tantra sometime in your life, you really have to have one of the prerequisites is that you study and you meditate on the 3 principal aspects of the path. So the last 2 BBCs, a few weeks ago, I talked about some of his sharings on renunciation, the determination to be free, and that this is this profound mind that gets in touch with its own Buddha potential, finally figuring out, and once again, this all about Dharma, and I think all of us come to understand it's a real process, it's a real kind of stage experience, but that finally we realize that when we say that it doesn't get any better than this, that is really a profound truth, that no matter what happiness we seek in samsara, no matter how beautiful, how pleasurable, how delicious, is that it's unstable, it doesn't last, and that if we continue to do it, there's going to be undoubtedly a level of dissatisfaction that's going to bring suffering. And so we've kind of, I think since beginningless time, we've been hooked onto the notion that this doesn't get any better than this, and that it's actually, we're quite okay with that. When in fact what Lama Yeshe is really trying to stir within us is that, but our capacity as human beings, because we have these beautiful, precious human lives, is so beyond it doesn't get any better than this, because it does. It gets a whole lot better than this. And cultivating this Buddha potential, this capacity to expand and open our hearts completely to every being in the universe is part of what he's really encouraging us to do. So for those first 2 talks, I kind of gave the idea that, okay, we're moving out of maybe aspiring to renounce samsara because of its low-grade, unsatisfactory conditions, and to start going into really try to fulfill our capacity as human beings with this Buddha potential. So I want to share, so the second of the 3 principal aspects of the path is bodhicitta, or the awakening mind, which we're going into a really big step here. So the first step is really, he says it's a wonderful first step to make because it's this deep compassion for ourselves and our own situation. And so we want to liberate ourselves from the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death, having these crazy minds under the control of afflictions and karma. He says it's a crucial, incredible first step. However, as we realize that our accustomed way of relating to desirable objects has been keeping us trapped in a circle of perpetual dissatisfaction, we've become more and more motivated to activate a deeper level of our being. Our purpose is to experience a type of peace and happiness that is stable and reliable, unruffled by changing circumstances and uninfluenced by the passage of time. But even this higher aspiration to win release from the frustrating cycle of desire and dissatisfaction is still incomplete. This is the $6 million question. Why? Because it is primarily concerned with our own welfare. So we're going back into the nitty-gritty truth that even this wonderful nirvana, this liberation from cyclic existence, is a very beautiful step. It's incredibly important for attaining Buddhahood, but we can't stop there only being concerned with our own welfare. That to really fully awaken this Buddha potential, we've got to cultivate the kind of mind that thinks of not only ourselves and for our own happiness and well-being, but for the happiness and the alleviation of suffering of all sentient beings. Okay, so we're going up into this bigger, more profound view. Okay, so then, and I love Lama Yeshe's language. He's just like kind of cuts to the chase in the words and language that we Westerners, I think, from the very beginning felt very, very connected to him. Okay, so the only way to break free from this neurotic obsession with ourselves, and since we've been doing it since beginningless time, I would say that is quite an accurate description of it, is opening our hearts to others. When we are truly concerned with the welfare of someone else, we automatically cease to be concerned with our own problems, at least for a while. And as compassion for others replaces pity for ourselves, we discover hidden treasures of strength and wisdom within us. It can be said that merely possessing this compassionate bodhicitta is a type of enlightened experience. And so as he goes on to describe this open space in our consciousness, what happens, and this is part of the, what I've been trying to do this past maybe year and a half or so, is I've been trying to not just see bodhicitta as this conceptual thing, sentient beings as being my mother and wanting to see their kindness. I want to get some sort of practical daily experience on, by turning my attention towards others, does it indeed bring me a happiness? And so what Lama Yeshe is saying, as we create this open space in our consciousness, we take on a much more universal character. Instead of being confined in our own petty reality, we move into a larger sphere of universal concern, which automatically liberates us from most of our problems. So I read this verse the other day. What I was seeing is that the self-concern that I find myself engaged in most of the time is like looking through, taking a pin and making a hole in a piece of cardboard, and then taking that piece of cardboard and putting it up to my eyeball. And that is my universe when I am totally under the control of the self-centered thought. I'm looking through that tiny little pinhole, and that's the extent of my world. It's all about me. Okay, there's somebody that can help me, there's somebody that can harm me, there's somebody, they don't do anything. I mean, it's all self-referenced in relationship to this very, very small universe. But what Lama Yeshe, this universal responsibility, we're going from a pinhole, we're going into a telescope. One of those beautiful telescopes that's in these amazing observatories that can look out beyond our solar system, out beyond this small little planet Earth that we have. And as often as we make such a fuss of insignificant events in our life that we turn minor difficulties into major problems, as we develop the universal view of bodhicitta, however, these small concerns, this little pinhole starts to open up and go, oh yeah, there's somebody else who's suffering. Oh, there's somebody else that needs some help. My experience has been, and I've been so focused on this the past year and a half, is that if I'm feeling crappy and I'm feeling pissed off and I'm feeling depressed, if I can just turn my mind to somebody else, even for 15 minutes, that whole anxiety, all that self-concern, faith, if not, disappears altogether. And that's what, and the little things stop being so big when I start looking and turning my mind towards caring about other people. And I'm seeing this more and more as a practical daily experience, as a huge antidote for when I get stuck in my self-pity, when I get stuck in my frustration, when I get stuck with this isn't going the way that I want. If I turn my mind to somebody else, even for 5 minutes, that telescope appears and that little concern just drops away and it doesn't matter anymore. It might come back later on because it's a bad habit that I have, but I've seen the possibility that using the telescope helps me to see that there is something much bigger than myself and that I have a capacity to have this very big view and to have this growing open heart. As this burden of self-concern drops from our shoulders, we experience a small taste of the complete freedom that comes with full spiritual fulfillment. Experiences like this are encouraging because they demonstrate so convincingly the practical day-to-day value of training and transforming our mind. Once again, bodhicitta, just like renunciation, is a process, and it takes little tiny steps. And one of the things that he says in here is that for many of us, we have a misconception about bodhicitta, is that either we confuse it with a kind of highly emotional, sentimental state of mind that we get overwhelmed by our own feelings of looking at the sufferings of others, or we think that we've got to be in some sort of transformative, transcendental path of seeing state to be able to practice. And what Lama Yeshe is saying, even for a few minutes a day, to turn your life simply, to work on your ethical conduct, to just show a little kindness to somebody each day, grows this. We're creating the causes and conditions to have, even though it's contrived, even though it's fabricated, even though it feels so made up and so superficial, it doesn't matter. As time goes on, these little moments of where we turn ourselves away from our self-centered thought to this beautiful mind, which is the capacity of our minds, is to have this Buddha potential totally, fully displayed and manifest. And bodhicitta is a crucial piece on being able to have that really come to the forefront of our minds sometime in the future. So as he says, it is important to understand that true practice is something we do from moment to moment, from day to day. We do whatever we can with whatever wisdom we have, and we dedicate it to all for the benefit of others. We just live our life simply to the best of our ability. This in itself will be of enormous benefit to others. We don't need to wait until we are Buddhas before we begin to act. And so I have been continually inspired because the self-centered thought is just proliferating like crazy during the course of the day, at least for me. And by just thinking about somebody else for at least 10 minutes and wishing to benefit them really helps me to disconnect from that kind of small thinking. And so the next time that I share, we'll get into one of the foundations for universal compassion, how we get started on really being able to turn our minds to this beautiful awakening mind of